Welcome back into another episode of the Hook 'em Hoops podcast brought to you by the Field of 68. My name is Jason Conander, joined by my co-host, Tommy Yarish. Tommy, it's been a little while since we've last talked. 2 games for the Longhorns since then, a win and a loss. A good win, an ugly loss, a big game coming up this weekend. We have a lot to talk about. How are you doing, Tommy?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be back here with you. Missed being able to chat about Texas hoops, but really glad that I'm back with my dog.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. So we have a lot to talk about today. I mean, first off, we'll talk a little bit about that Houston game last weekend. Not a whole lot to talk about, really. Texas got absolutely killed. It was an environment where, we thought the environment probably was going to get to the better of them, and it did. They went down in the first half after about 10, 15 minutes, gave up some big shots, couldn't get anything going. It was clear that the strategy was attacking the rim, and Texas actually shot only 2% higher on total field goal attempts than they did on 3-point attempts the entire game. And so Texas's strategy of attacking inside clearly didn't work. Dylan Dessou had a quieter game. Max Asmus had, what I believe was his first game in single digits as a member of the Texas Longhorns. So an inopportune time for that. But that was really, the Houston game was ugly. Do you have any big thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was an ass kicking. I'll start with that. That's the biggest takeaway for me. As far as Texas goes, I think if you think back to the first game that they played, Max Asmus and LJ Cryer basically switched exactly what they did in the
Mhm.
first game. Max Asmus had a really good game against Houston. LJ Cryer couldn't find the bottom of the net to save his life, and it was the exact opposite this time around. Asmus only has 7 points. I think Cryer had like 26 or something like that. He had a fantastic game. Another slow game for Tyrese Hunter. He only had 7 as well, 3 for 9 from the field in 33 minutes. And then coming into the game, I said it was going to be, the X factor for Texas would be Dylan Mitchell. If Dylan Mitchell had a performance similar to that of the one that he had the first time around against Houston, then maybe the Longhorns have a little bit more of a shot. He didn't. He had only 3 points and 5 boards. So really just a poor performance across the board, Jason. That was probably the worst Texas has looked, or one of the worst games Texas has played all season, in my opinion. And part of that is because Houston is just that good, but they came out really flat. There was nothing even from the beginning, and we went into it thinking that Houston's going to win big, or at least I did. I can't remember exactly what you predicted, Jason, but in the first couple of minutes, you kind of got the vibe, and usually you don't get that vibe in the first couple of minutes. But first couple of minutes go by, you just know like this is going to get ugly, and it did.
Yeah, it did. It did. And you know what happens? That was Texas's by far their most hostile road environment that they had played in. And I think it's good the way that the schedule ended up, where their biggest road games have been stacked towards the end of their conference schedule, because we're at this sort of impasse where they're likely going to make the tournament, but they have their toughest games of the schedule coming up. So they don't necessarily need to win those games, but you would like to, one, gain experience, learn what not to do, and two, learn more about your team. And I don't know if we really learned a lot about this Texas team in the Houston game. I think that was just a blowout that happens a couple of times a year to teams, especially when you're overmatched. And it's really as simple as that. I do think it's slightly ironic that both of us said that the bench would need to step up in this one. And the bench, I mean, did by Texas standards. They had 15 points, which, for Texas is they had actually 17 points, which is probably their highest scoring output in conference play this year.
I,
Which is
I think
like,
you're right. Yeah, that's
like if
that's
you were to
probably
have told
right.
me just the 17 points off the bench, I would have been like, wow, okay, like it was probably 10 from Shedrick, and Shedrick ended up actually getting 7 off the bench, and um, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was more of, those were the guys who were playing at the end of the game and they were able to score. And so, in conclusion, ugly loss, one that Texas will like to forget in terms of the taste that it'll leave in their mouth, but one that, should be a lesson learned, whatever their strategy was, which, I mean, it was clear they wanted to attack inside. Like, they shot fine from three, too, which kind of frustrates me. Like, they shot 33% from three, which is like around, if not better than they expect to shoot most nights from three. And they just kept driving inside and got denied at the rim. Like, that's not going to work. And so I'm glad that they had that opportunity to test out that game plan on national television. They got absolutely killed, and hopefully we'll never see it again. That's the
That
end of
that
my
that
thoughts on Houston.
but that's the thing, Jason. That is the worst possible game to try out a new offensive game plan. Why? Why are you attacking Houston on the interior? That's where they're at their best. That makes no sense to me. Like Texas's entire game has been basically to live and die by the outside shot. And if it's falling,
Mm.
they can run up the scoreboard on you. And they shot the ball well, but the volume of shots wasn't there as it's been in games past. And so it just seems like a terrible time to, try a new offensive approach when you've got such great interior defenders and a coach who's very good at developing interior defenders in Kelvin Sampson.
And look, we talk about straying away from the game plan. Like there had not been a hotter shooter in the conference, maybe not even in the country, from beyond the arc than Dylan Dessou. And he took 4 threes, still hit 50% of those threes. And then we'll talk about the K State game here in a second. Against K State on Monday, he shoots one. And so it's like, I think that we would all prefer that Dylan Dessou would just shoot the hell out of the ball until he goes cold. Because at the clip that he's been hitting it at, Jerome Tang said in the post-game press conference on Monday, Dylan Dessou is shooting 77% on open threes this year. Like, that's insane. That is absolutely insane. 77% on open threes. And, like, against Houston, you're not going to get very many open looks. And it was clear that, I mean, if Tang knew that, if he said that in the press conference, it was clear that K State's game plan was to prevent that. And yeah, they did. He only shot 1 3. But, like, when you have a guy in Dylan Dessou who has been out of this world hot, and then another guy in Max Asmus who is literally one of the highest scoring college basketball players ever, like you need to get those guys shots. Texas doesn't have a talented deep team where it's, oh, whoever has the open looks can hit, because we've seen that Brock Cunningham and unfortunately Ithiel Horton and Tyrese Hunter too have struggled on open looks this year. Like you need to focus more on getting your big dogs the open looks that they will make if you get them, instead of either forcing shots with Asmus and Dessou that they usually won't hit when they're forced, or giving putting the ball in the hands of incapable shot makers. It's just frustrating. It's inefficient basketball, and they'll be bounced early in the tournament if it continues to happen. Now on to K State. Better performance for Texas, especially defensively. I thought that was their best defensive game of the year. Rapid fire thoughts for you. If they win the Oklahoma State game, granted that they win that, I really thought that win on Monday clinched a spot in the NCAA tournament.
I mean, it was great in the sense that they got a win, but honestly, Jason, I don't know if it was that much better. I mean, like this is what's starting to concern me. Max Asmus, 3 of 10 from the field, 0 of 5 from three. He had 8 points. Jason, if Max Asmus is getting to that area where he kind of has sometimes in every season that he's played in college basketball, where he gets really cold, this is a horrible stretch to get cold in. You've got Kansas up next, and then I think Baylor at some point. I don't know if it's immediately after that or not, but this is a really, 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 really bad time to get cold because they're going to need him, especially if they do make it into the tournament like we've discussed so much on this show. And then you look at the 3-point shooting overall. Not a single starter made a 3-pointer. Ithiel
It was bad.
Horton made 2 out of the 3 3-pointers for Texas in this game.
They were wide open.
I would have never imagined that that's what I would say about this game. And we talked about it on this show just because of how bad IT Horton has been at shooting the ball this season. And he makes over 50% of the threes in this game. I mean, that's just jarring to me. And then Dylan Dessou, seems like now he's going to be your only consistent mainstay when it comes to production scoring the ball now that Asmus is kind of
Yeah.
he's taken a step down or two in the last couple of games, and I'm not saying that's definitive of his entire season, but if he's getting into that area where he gets into a cold stretch, then you might have to get a little bit more concerned if you're Rodney Terry and Texas. And then I thought Dylan Mitchell had a much better game, almost another double double. He had the 10 boards, but comes up 2 points short, and then 2 steals and 2 blocks. So defense certainly a very big positive to take away from this game, especially considering some of the scoring prowess that Jerome Tang's got and guys like Tyler Perry and Arthur Kaluma. They held Perry to 13 points, which I think is big. Kaluma added on 17, but then they held Colbert to 0 in the starting lineup as well. So overall, a solid defensive performance, and it's an uglier game, but you're always going to have those, especially in the Big 12 conference. You just got to come away with a win, and it was against a Kansas State team that was playing pretty well.
these were the games that they won last year. Like these dirty kind of okay, like not all three aspects of the game are coming together, but Texas just outgrinds the opponent and their veterans step up down the stretch. Like that was the best part about the win for me. Like it did feel like last year's Texas team, especially because of the bad 3-point shooting. Now that being said, like the defense was so excellent. People don't talk enough about how great Max Asmus has been at times this year defensively, especially when he's not overmatched physically. Like anytime the opposing team's primary ball handler has a remotely comparable frame to Max Asmus's, like he locks him down defensively. It's literally been ever since that Joe Toussaint game, the opening game in conference play. Like Asmus has been an above average defender, especially on Tyler Perry, who had every opportunity. Not well going into the game, probably would have liked to torch Texas. He's been one of the more clutch scorers in the country this year. K-State really needed a win. You would have thought he would step up. Texas didn't allow that to happen. That's good. Defensively, Tyrese Hunter had one of his best games as a Longhorn with 7 rebounds. He held Cam Carter to 8 points. In some of K-State's biggest wins this year, Cam Carter has stepped up. Like the guard play defensively was absolutely awesome. And then Dylan Dessou, who usually is a little bit of ability on the defensive side of the ball, actually had a pretty good game defensively on Adrian Colbert and Arthur Kaluma. Like those guys didn't play well at all. And so that was a lot of credit to Texas's on-ball defending. Like they did a great job. As for the bad signs, like, yeah, the 3-point shooting was horrible. I mean, they shot 15% from three. The 2 players who hit 3-pointers were Brock Cunningham and Ithiel Horton. Like, if you're going to rely on that in the NCAA tournament, you're absolutely screwed. The other thing I'm worried about is like looking at some of the road games. Like Texas hasn't performed well at home. They have performed well in terms of winning games on the road, but they've gotten lucky more often than not. Like Tyrese Hunter's shooting 15% from 3 on the road this year, averaging 6 points per game. He's the third scoring option, and he's averaging 6 points per game on the road. That does not bode well for the NCAA tournament. So as we have these home games where they should be getting guys hot, they should be, figuring things out. Like Tyrese Hunter and Max Asmus combined for 17 points, so they're both in single digits. Like I guess they're going to have to figure it out in Allen Fieldhouse and in Waco to get these guys hot. And I don't trust that very much. And so, yeah, there was more bad, I guess, than good in terms of the players who should have stepped up. But overall, I thought it was a positive performance. Texas beat a team that needed that game more than they did, which is something that we're not very accustomed to saying in any sport on campus at this school. And so that was a big positive. And Dylan Dessou, 10 of 11 from the free throw line. Texas has never shot well from the free throw line when it's mattered ever. Like now they have two guys really with him and Max Asmus, like where you're going to try and get them the ball down the stretch because they can hit it at the line.
Yeah, it's big. And I like your point about, having stuff to figure out going into Allen Fieldhouse up next. And then you have to go to Lubbock. And we know how much Texas Tech fans just love the Longhorns. Not to mention then traveling to Baylor. So your 3 biggest games all coming on the road. Jason, I'm curious as to your thoughts about this. I think if they get just one of those 3, you're at least looking at a 9 or 8 seed. I don't think they would stoop as low as a 10 with
Yeah. No, I
one
agree.
win. With one win against those teams, barring, and of course, I would be remiss not to add this too, barring Oklahoma State and Oklahoma also being wins for the Longhorns. So if they go out and have a 3-2 record down the stretch, I think they lock up an 8 seed. Maybe if they drop that Oklahoma game but still beat one of those ranked teams, you could make an argument for an 8 or a 9. But nonetheless, I mean, the tournament picture, regardless, it's looking pretty tough for Texas. Just because if they get out of the first round, oh boy, they're
This
probably gonna
weekend,
get walloped. But again, making the tournament at this point is gonna have to be the goal.
yeah, their best case scenario is being a 6 or 7 seed because if they are an 8 or a 9 and they win that first round game, like they'll probably win that first round game because that's the exact type of team that they have beat this year. Like a middling kind of like the 8 or 9 seed is like the type of team that either has a ton of great quality wins and can't beat a good team, or or it can't beat an average team, or has only beat average teams and lacks that good quality win. Texas can beat a team like that. They can't beat a 1 seed. They can maybe beat a 2 or 3 seed. Like Iowa State is your prototypical 2 seed, and they essentially took them down to the wire, even though it wasn't a back and forth type of game. Like they did almost beat Iowa State, albeit on their home court. Texas bodes better against a 2 or 3 than a 1, obviously. Now, with the upcoming schedule, Kansas on Saturday, we'll talk about that here in a second. Worrisome game, but probably the worst in terms of talent Kansas team that Texas is seeing in the last few years, and they've beat them in years past. Like this is sort of becoming like a program type of thing, like where Texas just kind of has Kansas's number the last few years. They either play them close or they beat them outright. And we'll get into the game in a second, but I think that that's something that'll play to Texas's favor. In terms of their tournament outlook, super quick, I think that they'll beat either Texas Tech or Baylor, just because Baylor they looked good against this year, and it's a new home court. Like it's not something that's really been established yet. Like Texas didn't play well in that old building, and maybe they'll play better in this new building. Like yeah, I think that that's something that could work in their favor. Texas Tech, I'm a little more worried about in terms of the recent history because they don't look well when they go over to Lubbock. Especially, just because that game matters so much more to the people over there than it does over here. But that shouldn't be the case this year. Texas Tech has completely locked up a spot in the tournament, and Texas hasn't. And so the Longhorns should want that a lot more. All right, let's hear some thoughts on the Kansas game. Should be a big one. 5 p.m. on ESPN at Allen Fieldhouse. For all we know, this could be the last time the Longhorns play at Fog Allen. Any thoughts on that? Thoughts on the game? This is like what I'm going to miss about being in the Big 12 is this game is like always having that program that you can circle, be like, all right, like whether it be road or home, like this is the one game I'm the most looking forward to. And so let's hear some thoughts on that.
Yeah, you stole the words right out of my mouth, man. I mean, every single game, every single time Texas played Kansas, you would always circle it because it just, and all puns aside, it just means more, right? Like this is it's the storybook program in college basketball, and Bill Self has been so successful there that you kind of gauge where you are as a team in the Big 12 by seeing how you do against Kansas, just because they've been the standard for so long, and obviously now they're reigning national champions, a top 10 team. They've been up and down all season. It's been very difficult to kind of make out what the legitimate long-term look for Kansas is this season. But Jason, I think I know of another team where we don't really know the long-term outlook of how they're going to do this year. Oh yeah, it's Texas. So it's a matchup of two unknowns where you don't know what you're going to get every night out of either team. And I think that it's been that way sometimes in years past. And that's why, like you mentioned earlier, Texas has been able to have a lot of success against Kansas in years past. It seems unlikely because, especially in college basketball, you think Texas and Kansas, man, Kansas should be, beating them every time. And that just hasn't been the case for whatever reason. The Longhorns have had their number, like you said. So this is certainly a game where, in comparison to Houston, I would be much less surprised if Texas won just because of the recent success, because they've had the offensive slumps. And this might be a game where Ronnie Terry says, okay, Max, you have the green light on every time you touch the ball, which I mean, he kind of already does, but to try and get him out of that slump and get him back into a rhythm. Same thing with guys like Tyrese Hunter, Dylan Mitchell, Dylan DeSue is obviously going to have the green light too. So yes, the talent roster for Kansas might not be as elite as it's been in years past, but they still have really good players, I think, and their three-headed monster of McCullough and Dickinson and DeJuan Harris is still very viable and very, very good on any given night. Those are three tough guys to stop. So I think Dickinson is probably the matchup that I'm circling in this game. This is going to be, if this game is won, it's gonna, and I'll let you get to your point in a second. If this game is going to be won, Dylan DeSue and Caden Shedrick are going to have to do a really good job down low of stopping Hunter Dickinson. And if not, then Hunter Dickinson could have a career night and this game could get ugly.
I think Dylan DeSue could have a career high on Saturday. Hunter Dickinson is just a horrible defender. And I don't think that Bill Self knew just how just how bad he truly is defensively coming into this season. I mean, usually this is a Kansas team that operates with a mobile big who can, crash the glass, swat shots into the first row of the stands. You think, David McCormick, Udoka Azubuike, even the Silvio D'Souza experiment, like that's not at all who Hunter Dickinson is. He is a score first player. He is not a selfless player. And defensively, he really struggles, especially guarding out on the perimeter. And that's where Dylan Disu has been at his absolute best this season. So I think that the game plan is clear, especially with DeJuan Harris being the starting point guard for the Kansas Jayhawks. He is probably the best on-ball defending guard remaining in the country. And so he will have a good game against Max Abmas. Like if Max Abmas takes takes DeJuan Harris's crown and ends up, going for a 20 bomb, I'll be very, very impressed because this is probably the type of game where Max Abmas will be passing up a lot of shots. And Tyrese Hunter needs to step up. Like he's been horrible on the road this year. He needs to step up. He needs to make shots early. Texas claims that they love to play in environments like these. So let's see it. Let's see him pounding the floor on defense, having explosive high rim flying plays. Like Kendall Weaver and Dylan Mitchell need to have those high flying dunks that get the crowd going at the Moody Center that can have the exact same positive impact on the team when you do that at a raucous road environment. And so some recent history between Kansas and Texas. Texas has won 5 of the last 7 games, including last year's Big 12 championship and a game in Lawrence in 2021 where Texas won by 25 points. And so that was the Shaka Smart coach team, too. That wasn't even Chris Beard. That wasn't Rodney Terry. That was Shaka Smart. So if Shaka could do it, RT could do it. They're not going to win by 25. I don't even think they're going to win by 5. Like if they win this game, it's going to be at the buzzer. They're going to have the ball in their hands at the end of the game. I think that this game is going to be closer than people are expecting. I think that we're going to learn a lot about the way this game is going to go from the first 10 minutes because Texas needs to match the adrenaline and the energy from the crowd. I mean, we just haven't seen them being capable of doing this, not just this year, but in recent years. Like, this is not a Texas program that feeds off the booze, that embraces the hate, that loves to be hated. They don't. Like they'd rather you don't talk about them and they can play basketball in peace, as far as I'm concerned. And so we're gonna need to see them on Saturday really own being the University of Texas, own the booing, own the hatred. This is the last time you're gonna be going into Fog Allen Fieldhouse. And the fans at Kansas are aware of that. They're not gonna be, they're not going to pull any punches on Saturday. And so it's time to own that. Let's get pumped. Let's hit big shots at the start of the game. Let's have these exciting plays. Like the formula is clear for Texas. Don't try and attack the rim against this. Other than Hunter Dickinson, they're physical at the rim with McCullough and KJ Adams. So they're going to have to hit a lot of 3-pointers, starting with Disu and Asmus hitting his open shots. Like the formula is clear. Will it work? I don't know. For me, I have to see it before I believe it. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say they'll get blown out again. I don't feel like that's a hot take. I think it's a much hotter take to say it'll be a close game. But I think that of all the Texas games that we've previewed this year, and I'm curious to hear what you're about to say on this, I am struggling to get a read on this one because, yeah, we get a different Texas team every time out, and I don't think that their performance in their last hostile environment is indicative of what we're going to see this time or the next time.
Yeah, it is hard to kind of gauge this one, Jason. I agree with you. So I'm going to kind of bank on years past and the success that Texas has had with Kansas. I don't know what it is about this game that Texas decides to, pull out all the stops. And I hate to use the term because it's become so cliche, but make it their Super Bowl, even though you could argue it's been kind of Kansas's Super Bowl since they've lost two out of the last seven, or five out of the last seven, excuse me. Um, I think the X factor for me in this game is KJ Adams for Kansas. I think that
Mhm.
if he has a really good game, especially on the offensive side of the ball, which he can because Texas interior wise has not been very good defensively this year, then things could certainly get out of hand and Kansas could run away with this one. He's shooting 60% from the field. And if he's able to do that against Texas, I like Kansas's odds. I like Kansas's odds regardless. Yes, this is a less talented Kansas team that we've seen in years past, but you can also say the same about Texas in a way in comparison, especially to last year, considering how good that team was. Um, so it's going to come down to can Max Asmus either find a way to get some shots up and hit them over McCullough, or can Tyrese Hunter have one of, if not the best road performances of his entire career at Texas? And I'm not really comfortable banking on that for sure. So I don't know if we're doing game predictions yet, but I'll give you mine anyways. I'm taking Kansas by 5-7 here, Jason.
Okay. I like that. I like that. I'm gonna go with a little bit of a hot take here. This might be one of the crazier things that I've ever said on this show, but I truly think if Caden Shedrick plays long enough to score in double digits, Texas will win this game. Like that will be very indicative that they're getting whatever they want inside, and obviously they're not in foul trouble. Well, maybe Shedrick does play a lot if D'Souza in foul trouble, but if Shedrick's playing a lot, it means he's not in foul trouble given his last games. And I thought that he has looked good from a health standpoint these past few games. They're just trying to get him into a rhythm. Like against Kansas State, he got a quick foul, and the entire bench was basically like, calm down, relax, like, don't lose it. Like, we want you to stay in the game. And then he stayed in for the next, 7 or 8 minutes, which was half of a half. And that's great for Caden Shedrick. Like that's what he came here to do. So much so that they're playing him with Dylan D'Souza now. And that's something that I had been asking for in the early part of the year when those two got healthy. And those two have just never been healthy enough at the same time to really make it happen. I'm hoping we see a lot of that on Saturday. I think some of the signs are there. The game plan is clear. Texas got the win that they needed to get on Monday. I agree with you. I don't think that they're going to win this game just because past Texas teams, while they didn't have that factor of loving to go into the road environment, pounding the floor, taunting the fans, that's what I think of when you say that you love going into a road environment. Like they were just confident and they just had something about them like where they knew that if they played their game plan to a T, they were better than the other team. And that's why they won in Allen Fieldhouse 2 years ago. I don't think that's going to happen this year just because, yeah, it's a less talented Kansas team. They're still more talented than this Texas team. I think that Texas is going to be challenged with some of the versatile scoring options on this Kansas team. Like Dylan D'Souza guarding the perimeter, it's an interesting experiment every time it happens. Hunter Dickinson performs really well behind the arc. I think he'll have a pretty big game offensively. Like the two-man game between those two, I am so excited to watch on Saturday because I really do think that those two players, if they stay on the court for long enough, can combine for 60 points because neither guy is good enough defensively and neither team has guarded the outside shot well enough this year to where if one of those guys gets hot, they're going to be able to be stopped. And so I think it's going to be a big game for Dickinson, big game for Dessou, quiet game for Asmus. If it's a big game for Hunter, Texas will be in this one throughout. If it's a big game for Shedrick, they'll win. I'm not ready to bank on all those ifs because when you go in an environment like Allen Fieldhouse, you need everything to go right to win the game. And I'm just not comfortable predicting that that's going to happen. So I'm going to agree with you. I've got Texas by, let's go with between 6 and 8. I think that the line is probably going to be 8 to 10. And so will Texas cover that? Maybe. I mean, Kansas has been pretty bad against the spread this year, especially like at home. They've played teams closer, especially in the non-conference. And so I'm going to say that Texas plays it close. I don't think they want to play back-to-back huge blowouts on the road like that looks horrible. That looks really bad. And that significantly lowers the ceiling of their seed as we get to March. And this is a Texas program where every year they really stretch out that ceiling of their seed when they get to March because they play their best basketball at the Big 12 tournament. And so, big first step towards achieving that can be taken on Saturday.
Yeah, you worded it perfectly. Just to clarify that you meant Kansas wins by 6 to 8, right? I think you said Texas.
Kansas.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
I said
clarify
Texas
because if you were
losing.
saying, I was like, whoa.
I meant to say Texas losing by 6 to 8. Yeah, no. Oh my gosh.
I was gonna be
Oh
like,
my
whoa,
goodness.
I don't know if we agree about that, big dog, but no, I think it's the right call. And I think your last point was on the money too, Jason. Like this may not be the best version of Texas that we've seen all season, just because for all we know, Rodney Terry could be like, he like it's like I'm trying to think of how to refer to this, but in Scooby Doo, where the villain takes the mask off, and it's like, okay, guys, let's go play like real Texas basketball now, and then they can come out in the Big 12 tournament and just shock everyone. Now, I'm not betting on that. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's why the Big 12 tournament is there, so you can ramp yourself up into March, and if you're hot in the Big 12 tournament, you're going to be hot in March. You're playing in the best conference in basketball. So if Texas gets one or two maybe wins in the tournament, I think you feel good going into March. But that said, I think we're looking too far ahead as well. There's still a lot of basketball left to be played and a lot of tough games for the Longhorns coming up.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of games left to be played. 3 of their 4 toughest road games, really their 4 most difficult road games of the season, were 4 road games in a row that they have. The Houston game last weekend didn't go well. Kansas game this weekend that we think could go well based on recent history, but in terms of what they looked like last week and what they've looked like against that high of a level of competition, probably won't go too well. And then the 2 games against Texas Tech and Baylor that we will preview in the upcoming weeks that I know we're both incredibly excited and intrigued for because those are winnable games where if Texas looks really bad in Waco or in Lubbock, the committee's going to or the selection committee's going to raise an eyebrow and be like, Texas doesn't look good on the road lately. They haven't looked good at home all year. Are they a tournament team? Like, we hope those questions don't need to be asked. Win one of the remaining non-Oklahoma State games before that OU game to finish the regular season, and we won't even need to have these discussions anymore. So,
I agree.
all righty. Been a pleasure talking with y'all. Hope everyone enjoys the game against Kansas. Should be a good one. Should be the last time Texas plays Kansas, at least for the next few years in Allen Fieldhouse. Yeah. I guess this game will be replaced with the Kentucky game, as
So
well as
emotional.
speculation every year. Like, people are not prepared really quick before we go for how every year when Texas plays Kentucky, people are going to be like, is this going to be the last time Calipari coaches against Texas before he joins Texas? Because once they're in the SEC, like, those rumors are going to be rampant, especially if this year ends on a not so good note. If this year ends with anything other than a second weekend berth like that, those are conversations that will be had. So I'm just saying, this is the last time we'll have a very peaceful marquee matchup of conference play. I'm excited for it. Allen Fieldhouse. Pleasure as always previewing it with you, Tommy. Hope everyone enjoys it at home, and we will be with y'all